Well, cheers, folks. Welcome to another episode, another epedition, another episode. We're going to call these epeditions from now on. Welcome to the next epedition of Instructional Designers in Offices Drinking Coffee. Hashtag idiotic, sponsored by Domino One, the solution organizations rely on when they want to create, manage, and deliver learning content efficiently at scale. Apparently, my brain and my mouth are not working very well together. So we'll just take that as an advisement, folks. Hey, gang, we have Donald Taylor here with us. Donald, I know that many folks in our space should be, ought to be, better be familiar with you. But just in case there's someone joining us today who hasn't encountered you somewhere yet or your work, tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to our gang here today.
Thank you very much, Chris. I've been around for a long time. I spent my whole adult working life in technology and learning, and that includes startup instruction right the way through to setting up and selling companies and chairing an institute. And currently, I do research and writing around what's happening in learning development, as well as chairing a conference in London, doing a lot of speaking. And I also do a bit of advice for startups in our space. So that's me.
Yeah. Fingers in lots of pies, lots of different angles that you come at our world. One of the things we wanted to focus on here today was your work that you've done in your recent global sentiment survey within our space. Maybe let's start about talking about a little bit, about the framework of that, how many folks, what kind of groups you were reaching out to, that kind of stuff, just to give us a baseline of where that data is coming from.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you can assume a lot about the data unless you've got the background. So I survey about 3,500 people internationally each year, and they come from something like 100 countries, sometimes fewer, sometimes more. And it's a very simple survey. I don't ask a great deal of people. There's a certain amount of information you can get anyway. But essentially, the key question I ask is, there are two key questions. One is, what do you think will be hot next year? People have a list to choose from. They can choose 1, 2, or 3. 95% of people choose 3 things. And what's your challenge? And for the past 3 years, it's been pretty consistent. AI has been what's hot this year, unsurprisingly. The challenge has also been AI. And I think that underpins much of the conversation we're going to have today, which is that we are excited by it, afraid of it. We don't quite know what to do with it, but we know it's going to change things. So that's the background.
Yeah, for sure. So,
where do I get a mug? Where do I get a mug from? Because I thought one of the deals of being on one of your episodes, is that I get an instructional designer's mug.
Yes, and anyone who joins one of our epeditions or epidermises or whatever we want to call them. Yeah, hey, we'll arrange that post-show. It's awfully hard to get them to folks in time for them to be able to display them.
I'm just kidding. But I do like the idea of an edition, because there's actually 3 words. It's an episode. It is something else, but it's also an expedition. We are making an expedition into the world of learning. There we go.
Yeah. Well, we're taking a foray.
Hey, we're journeying across the pond this time.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah. So besides the, those data points of people selecting from the lists, what other kind of observations do you have then about those 2 things that, that it's both the hot topic and the challenge, the AI aspect of things?
Okay. Well, obviously I live my life in a pool of data around this. And so I can bore people about it for hours on end. I'll try to be concise. The key thing is you ask people a question. The survey's been going for 13 years now. So you ask people a question, what's hot? What happens is over time is what was hot 5 years ago is not hot today. And that's for a variety of reasons. One is that it was hot and now it's business as usual. So mobile learning, which topped the first chart, I took it off as an option because everybody's really fussed about it. It's business as usual. Curation was hot for a while. That died away. It's not business as usual. That's what I call the wallflower. It's something which everyone likes to look at, but nobody actually invites to dance. And so that's two reasons. But generally over time, things fade away. They just become less hot. The three exceptions to that on the list, which have been on the list for a long time, are showing value, consulting more deeply with the business, and performance support. These three are related in people's minds in the idea that you consult with the business to see what's necessary, you do something to support performance, and then you show the value you've created. And they're very different. For 5 years up to last year, they had been completely consistent and not moved much. They'd in fact gone up slightly when everything else was falling down the table. Last year, they fell off a cliff along with everything else because AI sucked up all of the interest. Everything fell away, almost everything. AI rose up, personalization rose up, and those are the two key movers. Everything else fell away. So it wasn't surprising that those three things, which I call the value trio, fell away. It wasn't surprising, but it was still concerning for me. I was wondering to myself, have we all gone AI crazy? Do we not think the value is important anymore? This year, only 4 things really rose up on the table. AI continued to rise up from last year, and those 3 things bounced back. And it was very noticeable. They came back as strongly to where they'd been before. So it was almost as if the world was saying, yeah, we kind of got it wrong. Last year, we were just in the headlights, dazzled by AI. Now we're getting back to business. We still think it's important, but AI is only one thing, and we need to focus on value as well.
Yeah, and maybe people, had a period of time where what AI, its value or its potentials, et cetera, started to filter in as possibilities rather than complete unknowns or something that could be just simply overwhelming to start wrapping your mind around.
What's undoubtedly happened is that I do another annual survey as well, next one's going to come out in September, which will be on the use of AI in L&D. We've been tracking that for 3 years now. And for the first 2 years, more people have said they're experimenting with AI than actually using it. But this year, for the first time, there's a huge shift in self-reporting. People are saying, I'm actually using it, maybe extensively, maybe lightly, maybe piloting it, but I'm actually using it. So there's a huge shift. Now, then we have to have a whole dialogue about, well, what are you using it for?
Yeah.
And I think particularly in the field of instruction design, that's super important.
Yeah. So, I mean, what kind of insights do you have so far then of what people are using it for? Because we've certainly heard, lots of use cases from different contexts, different aspects of what we do in the L&D space but I'm always wondering, if someone's just throwing it out and I, have, recency bias because I've heard someone mention that more recently. And that's like, oh, that's the thing that people are doing. But I've always wondered about that, just my own reaction to those bits of info.
Chris and Paul, I'd love to hear what you're hearing, because you're close to the instructional design community. What is it that you feel and hear people are using it in the ID space? What are they getting out of it?
Yeah. So Paul actually worked with a lot of our client teams a couple of quarters ago to do some, analysis of things that people, were feeling were important places that they might be able to leverage AI. So I'll let Paul address that to at least initially throw some ideas out.
Yeah, some of the different things have been really around what I call production stuff. So when it comes to media, we have a lot of instructional designers who have been bereft of access to good design skills themselves or on their team. So production of media on that. And when I mean media, sometimes it's auto creation of audio narration, better text to speech than they maybe had access to before, but as well as creation of images, as they either don't have access to huge libraries or access to graphic design resources. Some other areas too of pushing for translations where perhaps translations weren't getting created before because for whatever reason they didn't have the budget, it wasn't the priority, but now it's less expensive to have at least a good enough a translation, it seems. And then other areas too, which has been particularly gratifying in my experience there, is that adding in closed captioning and some of the other things that people may have not done with accessibility. I'm having them some help with some of the tools to write text for alt text, even though some of that may be obvious there, but helping out with some of that there. Little bit. And then there's kind of the other areas where, hey, I'm using it as a more substantive piece of my learning, like as a coaching type agent. We've had some customers do that, as well as some people have been exploring it for creating the materials. That's also an area where I've heard a lot of reticence and caution on it. And personally, I've seen some materials created, even with citations and references, and being someone who knows that you need to read the references, because sometimes the references are referencing something else and they referenced it wrong. But yeah, seeing some of that stuff come out, and yeah, don't know how you came up with those ideas and words from that document there. Uh, but one of the interesting ways of kind of starting out was one gentleman I know, he actually used it to research the topic and provide summaries and help out with objectives in a prep for meeting with subject matter experts to make those meetings more efficient. So he wasn't as behind the wheel there. And, he was relying on the subject matter experts, but at least he had a little bit of base on there ahead of time. Again, not knowing the knowledge, but those are some of the areas that I see people using it the most. And the areas, like I said, when it comes to just the straight up generation of content, that's where I've seen either people have used it or their post on Reddit that like, that wasn't very useful, which honestly is a little bit rewarding on there that yes, people are actually being concerned about what's being produced and the accuracy of it. So
That's a really detailed and fascinating view into the life of IDs in the world of AI. And I think that it echoes what a researcher in the UK, Philippa Hardman, Dr. Phil Hardman, she's associated with the University of Cambridge, and she's done a lot of work in this field. She's doing stuff around how instruction designers can use AI. I have no financial relationship with her. I just know her, and I know she's really good. It echoes that. It's also, I'm heartened to say, Philippa's work shows that it's possible to actually use AI in a very constructive way to do things that we're doing now better, but also and faster, but also to do it underpinned by good instructional design theory. So you're not just churning out more stuff, which is my great fear, is that we churn out more stuff. What then happens is quality of the stuff can't be maintained. And then there's a sort of downward pressure on the standing of learning development. Because it's not just L&D that's using this to create learning materials, everybody else is as well. And now everybody else is creating stuff. You get what I call the beige wave, a sort of tidal wave of stuff that's a bit bland. And it's very easy to produce, and it might look quite slick, but it's not good ID. And I think in order to stand out, we have to have good instructional design. We've also got to be quite savvy about working with the business to make sure that we are showing value. And I think that comes back to the survey. The reason why people are concerned about showing value is I think there's already this sense that we need to be able to stand out. And look, there's a LinkedIn comment coming into the chat saying an example of enterprise-focused tools like Glean allow research within our own company resources. And I'm doing some work at the moment looking at how Copilot and other enterprise-level tools enable that accessing material. It wasn't possible before. Makes a huge difference. It leads also to another question. What's our job? In the past, very much L&D's job was, well, we were the gateways to information. Not anymore. Never mind the World Wide Web. You've got the World Wide Web supercharged by the fact that you can now talk to it. And that's phenomenal. What's our role then? I love the idea that we are going better prepared to subject matter experts. What do we then do with that material? I think there is a world of new stuff we can do that lies beyond creating courses and creating materials, and may have other ways in which we support people's learning using good ID, but it might not revolve around content at all. That's just, I think we're entering a brand new world where we need to do more than just do the old things a bit faster, a bit better.
Yeah, that was a thread that I was reading too. And I love Margaret's comment in LinkedIn about using it and internal. And I've seen that too from the companies. They're a little bit slower to adopt and they're moving towards an internal tool. But of course, people are moving on with that to pull up that information that might not be found. But this other thread was basically one statement was, yeah, I'm afraid that we're getting a race to the bottom again, almost a worse version of let's just convert the PowerPoint and maybe add audio and call it learning, which
Correct.
fortunately we bounded from that. But yeah, I think your sentiment talking about, hopefully it looks like potentially maybe we're evolving to, leverage that, but leverage that in the right way instead of just racing out to put out information that has dubious quality and benefit and impact.
And which perhaps people can access anyway. Maybe people can go to Glean and get this information about the company anyway. They don't need what then becomes a bottleneck of the learning and development department. But they probably need other things as well, or instead, to support them. If our job, I always say our job in learning and development is helping individuals and organizations fulfill their potential. Helping individuals and organizations fulfill their potential. Now, a lot of that is to do with learning, but it's not all about learning. There are a whole host of other things you can do and that we should be doing in L&D to support people and organizations. If we can do that, then I think we can stay on the right track. If we say that our job is creating content and that's all we do, I think there's a race to the bottom there. And I think it's very difficult. Look, you two, obviously, you're youngsters. You won't remember the heady days of 1999, 2000, the birth of e-learning. And yeah, this idea that you got your slides, put them online, and hey, your learning was taken care of. And it wasn't. It needed instructional design. It still needs to take place, but beyond materially. It needs to take place in the way that we are helping people learn and perform better in the context of their work.
So what would be some of those ways then that we need to think about changing, or the things that we need to be doing, differently?
I think these are all things which L&D has been able to do in the past, but we've always focused on our role as content producers. So I mean, look, that's where I came from. Back in the 1980s, I was writing English language learning books. I was teaching English language face-to-face. That was the era when if you wanted to learn something, you went through a person or you went through a book or had a class, because there was no World Wide Web. And even into the 90s, right, I was writing courses in Harvard Graphics, a precursor to PowerPoint, Excel, all that stuff, because people needed to come get it. And if you'd asked me what I did, I said, well, I create and I deliver courses. That was my job. That's one part. If you imagine this like a whole circle of things we can do, that's one part of it. There are other things around that. There's community. Now, in the past, perhaps we've tried to support communities, but actually with the interactive tools that you've got with Slack channels, Teams, other ways of people communicating at work, there are huge ways in which we can help people learn from each other. In the course of doing that, they generate content. And of course, it's very frustrating if you're on any sort of messaging platform and somebody asks a question which has been asked 10 times before. It's going beyond an FAQ. There's all sorts of ways now in which it's possible to glean that answer, make it available automatically. Somebody asks the question, bing, the answer will come in before somebody needs to go and look at an FAQ. That's a role for L&D. And we go well beyond that in all sorts of community learning from each other, learning with each other. We can support that. I think there's a great role still for facilitation, live facilitation, face-to-face and online for L&D. And I think instructional designers, if they've come from a training background, will be familiar with that. And I think people talk about the analog renaissance. I think that's a bit grand, but I think there is a sense that the value of things that can be done with technology is almost a commodity. It's not now, but it will become a commodity. And in that case, what you do to differentiate, well, you work on the human side of things. So I think the facilitation side of things is something we can really do. And as well as that business of working with community, I think there's also a lot of work we can do looking at performance itself, coaching simulation tools in particular, but also mentoring. We can support that in a whole host of ways. Now, we could take another 5 episodes to explore. And then, of course, there's skills and data. But look, I was talking about this research that we're doing at the moment into how AI and L&D is being used. Now, there's a lot of talk, quite rightly, about how you can use AI to support skills initiatives in your workplace. But if you look at how people are reporting their uses currently of AI, the top of the table is all given over. We give people a list of 12 things to choose from. The top of the table is all given over to creating content. And the skill side comes in the lower half. Perhaps 6% of people are responding with that, whereas almost everybody's saying they're doing something with content. So there's a big gap between the promise that AI has and its ability to deliver. So I think we're a long way from getting the full value out of it at the moment. Sorry, it's a very long answer, Chris.
Hey, and so but that gap then, particularly around the skills, is that because the AI tools aren't available to do that and developed yet because they're all so much of it's focused on content kind of things, or is that we just haven't learned how to use the existing tools to apply to that space?
Actually, the tools do exist, and I've seen some absolutely amazing. And there's a lot of snake oil out there. Okay, a lot of people claiming we'll come in, we've got 30,000 skills. People, I don't need 30,000 skills. Trust me, really, I don't. I need a small set of skills that are relevant to me. Also, people saying, I can automatically tell you give me somebody's job title, I can automatically tell you what skills they have. No, you really can't. If it was that simple, everyone would be doing it. But behind
AI for
it. Well, look, behind all that, there's reality of people actually using tools to do some basic stuff and some quite complicated stuff much more effectively with skills. The most basic application is the creation of job descriptions, which sounds so tedious. But if you're working in a large organization and you're in HR, actually getting a job description that is consistent and usable and accurate across a variety of jobs, across all your locations, it saves an enormous amount of time. People don't think about it. They just take for granted that the whole thing's a pain in the neck. That's a very simple example. But then the next step beyond that is increasing mobility. So DHL, the Deutsche Post company partner in Germany, has something like 600,000 employees, and it improved its internal resourcing, its internal applications for jobs, using a quite simple but powerful form of AI to say we don't have to look outside for people. We've got people inside, and we can boost internal recruitment. So I think there's a tendency to go for a moonshot. We're going to become a skills-based organization. I don't think that's necessary. I think actually it's possible to focus on one issue. How do we solve internal recruitment and make it better and get a result? The tools are there to do it. The blockers are not really around the technology. Guess what? It's the people. It's spent quite a long time looking into what has made learning technologies implementation successful. I've chaired the Learning Technologies Conference in London for 25 years now, and looking across the successful and the unsuccessful implementations, the common factor is always somebody on the team who's good at project management and somebody who's good at dealing with people to make sure that when things get sticky, you can still keep going. You've still got support from up above. It's so obvious when you put it like that, but it applies to everything. So AI is going to get here just as soon as we can sort out the whole people side of things.
Yeah, and I think back to there with the skills. I mean, and I've seen definitely some tools out there that are going beyond the suggested stuff and trying to help match that up. I just think back to some of those folks who have been around for a while, either bought off the shelf sets of developed skills, and it's like you said, it seems easy, but to create something that has measurable items from it there that you can tie content into is not easy. It's very time consuming, and it makes me think, yeah, what is that future for instructional designers? And as you were chatting, I was thinking, well, part of it is focusing on, what are those questions? And then now we have access to even more so all that information. We can ask more complex questions, but it is what are the right questions for where I'm going? Do I have the time to
Yes.
even think about it? Am I thinking critically about that or thinking critically about the answers and helping to shape that information that comes out of there to shape what information goes into the AI engine?
Paul, what's your feeling about how people in the ID space are feeling about AI right now? Is it Beauty and the Beast? Is it both something which offers tremendous opportunity and
I
also
think it
offers
is.
risk?
It
Yeah.
depends, as you said, it's people there and their perspective. I see both sides of people who are very excited about it, embracing it, using it in different ways, like prepping themselves, developing things, helping them if they had done some light programming before, being better at it now with it through AI certainly helps out. And then there's several, many others too, even some of those same people who are excited about it, who are also concerned about what is next for them as a profession. I think much like anybody who's in any writing profession, folks I've talked about
Yes.
who are doing copywriting, technical writing has come up for other folks, which is a
Yeah.
parallel, and very, very concerned and seeing that the job availability, especially if their contractor, is starting to go away. People are deciding they don't need that, or what they can do with the AI is good enough, which sometimes it is, but let's face it, sometimes it isn't too.
That's a key thing, the question of whether it's good enough. And I think our perceptions of what passes the quality test have shifted. I think Chris mentioned this earlier with translation, this idea that, well, we can translate a whole bunch of stuff, which we just couldn't do before. We couldn't afford to translate something into, let's say, European Portuguese as opposed to Brazilian Portuguese. It's a national language, it's not a minority language, but still, maybe we didn't have somebody who we could turn to and it wasn't quite worth doing. But now you can do it. Look, it's 97%. It's not perfect, but for most technical documentation, it's fine. I read the instructions to my headset and the translation's all over the place. I don't know who did it, but
Yes.
I can make out what's going on. It's good enough and it's better than nothing. I think that's the key thing. And I think if the replacement is, well, you have nothing or you have this 97% translation, most people go for the 97% translation. You don't want automatic translation when you're negotiating a nuclear arms treaty. That needs to be a human being who gets the nuance right. Most other stuff is going to be okay. And that's tough for translators. It's all very well saying your job won't succumb to AI. I know translators whose job has succumbed to AI. Interestingly, actually, on the survey results from last year and the year before, translation was reasonably high as one of the uses of AI in L&D. It was noticeably less used in the UK and the US than in the rest of the world. So the rest of the world is using AI absolutely for taking English stuff and putting it into local languages where we monolingual Anglo-Saxons haven't bothered to do so.
Might be part of the blinders we have because of the sheer, presence of our of our first tongue too. Yeah.
Well, it's the sheer fortunate that everyone else, if they do have a
Yeah.
second language, is a good chance it's
Yeah.
English. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
We had
That's it.
a
And
client,
we're lucky,
a
but
client.
sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I had a client team I was speaking with just last week who were doing initial experiments with translating. Canada, where Domino's headquartered, bilingual country. So government agencies have to have English and French, and the French is French Canadian. So there is dialect aspects to it but they were running
Yeah.
initial tests on having it automatically translated. And what they found was that, yeah, in a lot of cases it was pretty good, but because the nature of their space, it can't also had jargon and contextual things that they realized that currently it was not sufficient. So they were actually going the normal translation route because of the work to massage was equivalent to having sent it off to the translation department. So interesting. And they, as I say, very jargony, very specific, and lives are at risk with this content too. So they have reason to be cautious.
It's a really good point, actually. I mean, if lives are at risk, absolutely. In addition, there's all sorts of issues around the sense of somebody else coming in, and that's always noted when it comes to language. So British people, not me, but people very often throw their arms up at the idea that the word color hasn't got a U in it. Oh, for goodness sake, I can't possibly read this document, which is absurd, right? But look, if you've got a document and you're going to, in Canada, obviously the Quebecois want to read it in French, or some will want to read it in French, but they want to read it in Quebecois French. They don't want to read it in French of France. And it could look grossly insulting if you get it wrong, even if lives aren't at risk. And so there are lots of reasons why the nuance is terribly important. I sometimes hear people, I go on holiday to France and I hear people speaking French, and think, what is that accent? And you realize, okay, so they're from Quebec. That's why it has this. I can't do it. I can't explain it, but you know it when you hear it. It's very different. And you've got to accommodate that. And of course, when you're creating content, you have to be sensitive to that. And that's another thing that IDs should, I think, be good at and should be able to take into the AI space, which is, hey, look, you think it's all about content. Oh, yeah, that's part of it. But I can tell you, I've got the ideas around and the knowledge and experience around the nuance of dealing with things internationally and indeed within different cultures within the US or within the UK. And I can tell you why we need to go beyond a simple translation or a simple creation of content. And if we alter it in these places, it'll make a huge difference. Coming back to the business of people being the stumbling block to adoption, very often, if you get it wrong first time, you don't get a second shot, or the second shot takes you much longer because people are so annoyed by the first one. Getting the language wrong is a great way of ensuring that you're going to have to go back and have another run up at it that's going to take a lot of energy. So getting that sort of nuance right is not a nice to have. Very often it's a make or break for an implementation.
That kind of makes me think of another thing that you were talking about there, and AI and the ethical considerations of using it. Do you say you use it there? How do you check it? How potentially, of course, the default is quote unquote very nice, but we've all seen things in the space. I think some of the most recent ones were in X and Hitler and some of the other things that came out. But thinking of the fact that a lot of organizations themselves don't yet have ethical guidelines or even guidelines around using AI, other than maybe they're bringing it in or something, or don't being that the only guideline. What are some of the things that designers should be thinking about, perhaps as they start to embark that in themselves, or they're already using it and perhaps they need to step back and go, make sure that you follow these types of ideas?
I think we've got beyond the stage of people uploading sensitive company information into large language models without making sure that at least you've checked a few things, because there are so many horror stories around that.
Yes.
You'd hope that people aren't doing that anymore. I think probably there's a whole bunch of things you could say: do this, don't do that, talk to this person first. But the simple way of looking at it, I think, is to think that this black box of a large language model isn't magic, although it appears to be magical. It's just software. And if you imagine the software as being tens of thousands of enthusiastic, highly caffeinated, but not very knowledgeable interns, what could possibly go wrong if you gave them your data or you took the information from them? And I think if you think about it that way, then you start thinking, well, okay, I need to be a bit cautious about this or that. But it's also worth noting, of course, that a lot of this isn't in the gift of the IDs themselves. Very often, the organization will, or certainly should have, some rules or some guidance around this. And I think that's the place to start. The worst place for an ID to be is say, well, I did this and I thought it was all right. And IT to say, for the love of everything holy, haven't you read the guidelines that we've got here? And then you've got no leg to stand on. I think most organizations now have got something in place. And if they haven't, at least cover yourself by going to IT and asking, and maybe HR as well, asking what the guidelines are. I think that's got to be the first step.
And I'm thinking, even if you IT and they don't quite have guidelines, or they have the basic guidelines of these are two things you can or can't do or whatever, is almost for your team, make guidelines, because there's too many assumptions out there. And I think as we use AI, I use it, it seems like it's intelligent and figuring things out. But as you understand what's going behind it and why it works the way it works, there isn't thought behind that, and there isn't links behind that.
No.
There's lots of correlations. And as one of my favorite phrases as a grad student was, correlation does not prove causation, and there's not just because it's there, just like all the appealing posts that we see that sound really good, but perhaps have no truth whatsoever behind it, as you find out if you actually investigate.
Yeah, and
Nope.
they are seductive. They're seductive. We want to believe them because they are so beautifully expressed. But the thing is, we've all met people, and particularly politicians, who are very articulate and tell a good story. But hang on a second, you wait, you put yourself back and say, how do I know that any of this is true? Who are you influencing? I think we have to ask the same things about AI. All it's doing, one word after another, is throwing some quite complicated dice to work out what word comes next. There isn't any thought there, however much it looks like it and feels like it. And being able to put that distance between us and this device, which is almost inveigling its way into our lives because it's using our language, it's talking to us, it's sharing stuff with us. I mean, it's terribly easy to think that this is a person, and of course it isn't. And I refuse to call, a lot of people call their large language models he or she or whatever. I say it's it. And I don't say please and thank you to it, which is terrible. I know. People say, well, you should say please and thank you, because otherwise you'll stop saying please and thank you to people. I say, no, I shouldn't, because it's not a person. And I don't want to get in the habit of it, because I think I'm falling into the trap of anthropomorphizing it, making it seem like a person when it's not.
Yeah, and I
My
think,
wife and I have been catching up on Star Trek Voyager, and the episode we watched last night was where the emergency medical doctor hologram was arguing for personhood because it had created
Yes.
a novel, a holodeck novel, which someone then more or less pirated and put out. So there was the core of the episode was this debate over personhood for an artificial intelligence holographic entity.
Oh, I don't even want to think about it, Chris, because I'm sympathetic to the idea. And that's the trouble. I have to fight down
Yes.
this idea that no, it does have the rights, but I need to suppress that. It's just a bunch of numbers.
And here's a show
I
that's what 15, 20 years old at this point in time, and was already raising these issues about artificial intelligence at that time.
Absolutely.
And I think back to there, I love the analogy, a very complicated, perhaps good rolling the dice of that answer. And it strikes me, you really need to understand what you're looking for. I've had multiple iterations myself when I've been using XAPI data and having it analyzed, and just amazed at what it came out with. At the same time, some of the conclusions and results it provided, I knew what the data I was feeding in, and I'm like, that's wrong. And I would say, how come you did this? You concluded this, and then of course it says, oh, you're right, and lauds me for catching its error, and then redoes it. But even running the same analysis twice, sometimes you'll get different results based on how it was asked.
Yeah.
There wasn't asked exactly the same, even sometimes exactly the same, especially if it's not based off of pure numbers data. You'll get different results. And I think that's part of the key to looking at it and using some of this, especially if you're using it to generate that content, not relying it to be more like my colleague who used it as a prepped, almost like skimming or using the cliff notes to get ready to speak to the SME to make that time more efficient.
Yeah.
But not trying to go ahead and write the.
That makes a lot of sense. Paul, how did you know? I think because for me, I had the same experience. How did you know that doesn't look right? That answer. How did you know that?
Well, it ranges from the simple. I was doing one the other day, and this was me doing some own research on cars and stuff. And it concludes all this stuff there. And it actually says, oh, and this is the best value. And the numbers it puts out there, if you just read it closely, you go, no, it's not. And then it's like, oh, well, that's because and I was extrapolating this and that. And like, okay, well, I could
Mm,
understand maybe, but of course, none of that was explained there. We just came to the values. And if we're scheming things on, in other cases, it is more difficult. You coming up with the information,
Mm,
and I had been looking at the original data set, the raw data,
yeah.
to help me figure out, hey, how can I narrow in, ask the right questions without summarizing it manually? Because that's what it was doing it for me. And if I hadn't been looking at the raw data set, some of the conclusions and summaries that they put out sound very valid, probably weren't that badly off, like not a 97% language accuracy, but more like 75, 80% data. It might have been okay for what you're using it. But in many cases, when you're compiling and perhaps looking at learner data, as I was, that would give you some pretty false conclusions or make you seem that it was better or worse than it actually was. But yeah,
But
another,
you've seen the
you go
original data,
back and
and you're expert on the. Sorry, Paul. Go on.
yeah, and I say in other cases, I've looked at it and I realized like, oh, that sounds great, and but then I'm like, that that sounds too good to be true. And I look at the citation, I'm looking at the citation, and I can't see how they possibly came to that conclusion other than like, oh yeah, you were reading this and you misunderstood it because that does not equal that. And it's work to go ahead and do that.
And I think you can tell if it's right or wrong because you know the original data and you know the context and you're an expert in this field. My concern is that people who are not expert can't make that judgment. And so I think as instructional designers, it's very important to get a second opinion. So if you're creating any material and you're heavily relying on a large language model and you're not an expert, you need the SME input. And I think that's something that AI is doing already in the creation of content, is that it's speeding it up, but it's also changing the workflow. So it used to be get the information, go away, create something, come back. Now it's much more iterative because it can be, because things can be done much faster and because you need to check it. So I think that's a good thing. I think you're going to, because what happens with an iterative workflow is you end up with something that has changed and improved at several stages. And so it's a much better fit with the SME's understanding. So I think that's all to the good, but I do think it's crucial that it's iterative. The area where I've particularly seen that happen is with video, because video is such a high cost thing to go and do, or it was, and now it is extraordinary what you can create. And I've seen absolutely wonderful learning materials created at a fraction, a thousandth, a 10,000th of the cost it would be to run it through a regular video production program. But we've all seen those videos where people have 2 kneecaps and 6 fingers, right? The same thing could be happening with the content. So you've absolutely got to get the buy-in of the SMEs and so on, not least because there's going to be somebody else in the organization, somebody else who's not in L&D, who is bewitched, dazzled by the quality of the stuff that you can produce, and who will go out and say, hey, I've done this thing for learning about, I don't know, how to check our fish are fresh when they arrive off the van.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks good. And then you, again, Paul, just like you were saying, you look at it and think, hang on a second, and then it all falls to pieces. And I think that's where we can do a better job faster, providing we're staying in touch with the people who are the real experts. And we must do that, or we run the risk of losing credibility.
So if we could, I don't know, offer a couple of things that really should be on our radar as IDs as we're thinking about AI, what would be the 1 or 2, I don't know, top recommendations that you would say?
So I would offer 2. One is within the world of instructional design. One is outside it. So I would say accept that AI is going to change your job entirely. You're almost without question. And go out and look at the resources online that already are there supporting people doing a great job designing stuff with AI. And they're out there, all some really well produced courses, ideas, resources. That's the first thing. I'd say just get much better at the new world of instructional design with AI. But then the second thing I'd say is think about when I talked about this range of things that we do in learning and development. So you think about the other things which you might find you're really good at. Could be community. It could be skills and data analysis. It could be supporting performance in various ways. And this is not a leap in the dark. We're not saying you're going to go from being an instructional designer to selling apples on a street stall. What we're saying is you're going to extend your existing skill set into another area where you think there's a particular area of potential. All of those ones which I've described have huge growth at the moment. And I think actually ID is the area which is under pressure because of this risk of commoditization, the race to the bottom that Paul was talking. So I think become as good as you can be what you've got, accept that work might be under threat, and find other areas within L&D in the broader context that you can expand into using AI, which are going through a growth spurt, unlike the production of content, which is, I think, suffering.
Very cool. Donald, this has been an absolutely great conversation. So awesome to have you with us here. Lots of stuff. And I feel very confident we're going to look to have you back because, as you even mentioned, there are lots of these topics that could become five epeditions themselves. So anyway, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you making time to join us here on Instructional Designers in Offices Drinking Coffee. Folks, Instructional Designers in Offices Drinking Coffee, as always, is brought to you by us folks here at Domino. Paul and I are both team members here at Domino. We put together a platform called the Domino One platform. Great place for organizations, large organizations, to create, manage, distribute their content, take things up a notch. Check us out, domino.com, DOMINKNOW.com. He said in his sexy radio voice. Anyway, yeah, I that one I can't do those that without turning in a radio voice, man, for whatever reason. Gang, thanks so much for everybody listening and joining us, listening to us on the downloads that we know that so many of you folks do. We've been really, really blessed by when we brought Idiotic back this past calendar year, how many folks we know are listening out there in the mobile device world on their podcast apps, etc. Really appreciate you folks joining us and having time with us. It is time to dance on out of here. I will put on my best James Brown moves, and you might see a little Walk Like an Egyptian thrown in here. But let's bring in the music and wrap things up. Hey, thanks so much again.